Hey everybody, AC here, and welcome back to another episode of Slime Rancher. Last time, we got all of our slime combinations together. And we started doing a little bit of work around the ranch. Work that we are going to finish off today. Just gonna put the plorts I've gathered into storage, simply so I can say that I have a bunch in storage, for really no other reason other than that, other than to fill up inventory space. So, yeah. Alright, and fire and puddle plorts. Those are over here. And there we go. Oops. Okay. Toss the rest of the heartbeats into the corral. Boom. Okay. I'm gonna get a few more phase lemons. Boom. Okay. Good. Now I need to feed my crystal roses. Wow, you guys have already gone through 100 carrots. Well, good thing I'm here to give you more. More carrots and more odd onions. All right. Now, make sure these guys are extra fed in order to reduce the chances of them creating storms. Okay. Put this here. All right. I need to go get carrots. Just carrots. Okay. Now, I'm gonna head in here, feed my... Alright, cool. That's it. Ah. Okay. Ah! All right. Cool. Now that that's done. Oops. Okay. So I'll be good for a few days. I'm good for a few days as far as, like, needing to feed them. So, I'm gonna have Beatrix sleep till the morning. And now we head off. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and make a pit stop. Get a couple chickens, just in case. Just in case we run into any, lucky slimes or gold slimes while we're out. No harm in being prepared. Here we go. Cool. Alright, cool. Alright. Let's get going. Oh, wow. Yeah, see? Right off the bat. I knew it was a good idea to bring a few hens. Ah, I almost had two. Wow. That's real lucky. Alright. Well, this is the dry reef. This is the dry reef. A coral-crusted ocean floor that now basks under a golden sun. A coral-crusted ocean floor. That right there tells us that everything here on the Far Far Range was most likely underwater. A long time ago, it was underwater. That's what this is. That's what that basically tells me. That all of this, everything we've seen in the Far Far Range, was at one point underwater, and we know that the moss blanket didn't always. We know that the moss blanket didn't always have so much greenery in it. It used, like Hobson said so when we found his letter about it. He said that most of the greenery didn't start coming in until after he moved in. So that's really interesting. That's real fascinating. So Then when we come over here, there's all this stuff. What is this? The way it's shaped, it looks like it could have been ribs to some kind of giant creature. And if this was all supposed to be underwater before, maybe they are. Maybe they're really weird bones. Because, I mean, this is an alien world. For all we know, this is an alien world. For all we know, bones in this world could be made of stone or whatever this material is. And then you see that out there, those structures way off in the distance. And you gotta wonder who made that stuff. That there was some kind of civilization that made that stuff, and then you get more of that. You start to get more of that when you go to the ancient ruins. And there's structures like that everywhere. It is so baffling as to why there are so many structures. But yeah, look at this. A statue for a slime. And then you got all these different archways. And this was clearly meant to be like a village of some kind. You can even kind of see certain areas where houses might have been. And just something happened. Like here's a pond, and this was clearly somebody's clearly this was like somebody's garden or something. And then you got areas like this had to have been like walled off at some point. So this must have been like somebody's home. And then you go down here. And you start getting the things like the two doors. This had to be someone's home. This was somebody's home. And something just happened, and whatever the civilization was died off. But they clearly worshipped slimes. There are so many statues that you can find all over this place, and even at the beginning, at the start of the whole when you come out here, you come out to the front. They built a huge door leading to the ancient ruins, like it's some kind of like very high society, like it was some kind of high society civilization. Like out here lived a bunch of people, a bunch of peasants, and there's where the high-end people lived, and you got all these. This was some kind of structure, some kind of shrine that worships the slimes, that led to some kind of high-end civilization, kingdom place. There is just so much mystery going on in this game. You can even see remnants of a civilization in the Indigo Quarry. You can see some semblance of civilization there. Like, let me get a little further. Ooh. Here we go. This is the way. And here we got even more stuff. This had to have been bones. These had to have been bones. This must have been like some kind of spine or something. These have to be some kind of bones of some kind. It looks too odd to be some kind of building, unless it was like a giant silo. If it was a giant silo, that would make a bit more sense. However, if it was a giant silo, you'd think we would see the bottom part of it, because this had to have snapped off from somewhere. It had to have gotten snapped off from somewhere, but we don't see anything like that. So that leads me to believe that these were some kind of really weird bones from like some kind of undersea gigantic creature. And you see, like, wood was built. Wood was built over here. This wasn't something that was built recently. It is possible that Hobson built all of this, but we also know in his notes he was already getting in on years when he came to the Far Range in the first place. We already know that. We know he was already getting in on years when he came to the Far Range in the first place. I doubt he would find time to build all of that. So that still begs the question, who built those wooden structures? And then let me just get back to my ranch so I can get to the next area I want to talk about. And then you get to the Glass Desert. The biggest and most obvious clue that there was a civilization living here. This must have been a sanctuary for all slimes. Way back when. Way back when. And some kind of ancient race built a civilization here in order to coexist with the slimes and worship them. You can tell that they worship them because there are statues just all over the place in their likeness. The slimes were clearly seen as like godly creatures. It's the only way to explain all of that. And then, when you get further into into the Glass Desert, things get even weirder. me just make my way over here. You have these huge buildings. They were clearly meant to hold the different springs. I'm assuming that those are like. I'm just gonna call them the Water of Life. I'm just gonna call it the Water of Life. It was meant to house the Water of Life, which I'm assuming that the Water of Life is what. I'm assuming that the Water of Life is what allowed the slimes to appear in the Glass Desert in the first place. And my guess is that this is where all slimes originally came from. And then somehow slimes found their way to other parts of the far, far range. They managed to leave the Glass Desert and find their way to the ancient ruins, and then eventually down to the moss blanket into a quarry and dry reef. But I believe this is where all the slimes originally came from, was here in the Glass Desert. And the Glass Desert, definitely, the structures definitely look a lot more put together. The structures look a lot more put together than they do in the ancient ruins. And then you get in here, and we see that there's working lights. You can get these things, you can build them, but this is the only place where you actually see stuff like this, is here in the Glass Desert. It's the only place where you can find working lights like that, is just here in the Glass Desert. And then you will go down here, and you got what I assume is a teleportation machine. You got the teleportation machine. And Hobson says that he was going to take that he wanted to take one final journey. But then you come over here and it says he couldn't do it, that he loves Thora too much, and that he decided to go. Hold on. My cat finally wants out. Oh. Get out of here. Alright, so and I don't know exactly what this is for. This is kind of the big mystery to me. It looks like it could be... It looks like it could possibly be some kind of... used to... it looks like it could be used as some kind of, like, observatory. Or maybe there was a machine here. That's quite possible that there was a machine here, given how there's so much rubble in this area. It's possible there was a machine here that blasted away any meteors that came too close to the planet, because they don't want to risk anything happening to this. So, clearly... Hi! Hi, Gilded Ginger! So clearly, this clearly they were trying to protect this thing. This thing is clearly was absolutely important to the race that was here before. But the question then remains, what happened? Why did they leave? Did they leave, or did they die? Here is... I'm going to get back to my ranch and just kind of tell the whole story as I go through the different areas. Alright. Alright. So, here's what I think happened. I believe that years ago, probably thousands of years ago, there was an ancient civilization of people who knew the true meaning of the slimes and worshipped them as gods. This race built huge structures for living, and lived in harmony with all the slimes, worshiping them, keeping the slimes happy. They lived throughout the entirety of the Far Far Range, but their main base was over in the ancient ruins. That's where they had the shrine. That's where they had a big shrine dedicated to the slimes. That led to what was essentially the kingdom for the ancient civilization. This area was that kingdom. There were houses and buildings all over the place. And then That building over there that leads to the entrance. Fine. Yeah, that building. That was the king. That was the palace. That was the palace. Or perhaps this was the palace. From this structure to there. This could have very well been, this right here very well could have been the palace. And that behind the palace, they built this structure because they found the portal that leads to the Glass Desert. So they built this whole structure around the portal. I believe that this and the ceiling were here. Oh no, not the ceiling, but like this. This was here. The portal was here. The portal was here, and they built this whole structure around this portal because they discovered that that is where all of the slimes first came from. That all the slimes around the Far Far Range originally came from the Glass Desert. So, what exactly happened to this race? Well, I believe that all of this coral that we see throughout, this wasn't here when the ancient civilization was. And then something happened. I believe that the slimes, each of the slimes, were pretty much staying in their own select sections of the map. Because we see in the Glass Desert that there are statues of very specific slimes. Which leads me to believe that there were specific homes for every slime. And I believe that the ancient civilization kind of broke down those barriers and started bringing slimes into other regions. They started bringing slimes into the other regions to live and prosper in other regions, thinking that they were pleasing their gods by doing this. But that created TARS. Excellent timing. I couldn't have asked for better timing. Soon there was a tar outbreak across the world. the ancient civilization could not contain the TARS. The ancient civilization could not contain the TARS. They continued to run amok and destroy and kill all slimes that they came across. There was nothing they could do. And this created an imbalance. When they unintentionally created TARS, this created an imbalance. An imbalance that was corrected when the ocean rose up. The Slime Sea was once a regular ocean, I believe. And it rose. It rose, and it covered everything. The people of the ancient civilization had to evacuate to the Glass Desert, which exists somewhere far away on the far end of the far, far range, somewhere that was unaffected by the rising ocean. And when the ocean rose, suddenly giant behemoths began to swim around in its ocean. Huge sea creatures that swam around in the ocean that used to be the ancient civilization. And so this civilization left to the Glass Desert. They left their homes, they came to the Glass Desert, and they began to rebuild their civilization here. However, as you can see, they had to make their civilization within the confines of the safe zones and underground in order to avoid the storms that would constantly rain down from the sky. It's quite possible that they didn't even know about this when they first came here. But given how nearly every single one of these buildings is either built around a safe zone or underground, like in that case, nearly every single one of them is like that. So I believe that they knew. They knew about the storms, and they built around it. Suddenly, they weren't giving the slimes their own space. They were no longer giving slimes the space that they needed. They were invading that space, and they were invading that space. They were using it for their own means. And then we get here. I believe this was meant to be this, given the lack of any form of roof. I believe this is where they kept
whether I believe this is where they kept certain things like crops, and maybe they kept slimes in here. It's quite possible that they kept a lot of mosaic slimes in here. It is very possible they kept a lot of mosaic slimes in here, because mosaic slimes can rain down little glitters that turn into fires. So perhaps they kept some slimes in here. Perhaps they kept mosaics and dervish in here, and eventually they grew so angry that they started to create these giant glass statues. However, they clearly didn't do that for all of the glass statues, because while that one can be explained away like that, you got these massive ones here. This had to have been due to the natural storms of the Glass Desert. I believe that the storms got worse and worse. The storms were getting worse and worse, and they were destroying, and it was destroying their homes. Left with no alternative, all they could do was continue to march forward, continue to build outward in an attempt to find an escape, find some kind of sanctuary, a place where they could finally be free. They could be free of the. They could be free of. They could be free. They could be free of the storms and the ocean. And so they began to build outwards, out towards the Sand Sea, building those structures there as kind of waymarkers, as waypoints, to tell what directions they've gone in before. Because, as you can see, it's very difficult to see some of them. So I believe that way back when this ancient civilization was here, there were a ton of not just firestorms, but sandstorms as well. They were plagued by firestorms and sandstorms, and so they had to build so many of these things just to keep track of where they were. And they kept building outwards. You can see that they go on for miles and miles. They continue to build outwards, trying to find some kind of sanctuary, and clearly they never found it. Because then, eventually, they discovered this room. Well, they built it, but they discovered that this place was special. It was different. Something about it was a lot different. It was a lot different from anything else in the rest of the world. It was almost magical. So they tried different experiments and eventually discovered that this room, when used correctly, had the power to transport you to another world. Another world, another time, another dimension. Who knows? But it is a teleportation device. So they finally figured out how to get this teleportation device to work. And then they left. every one of them left, abandoning this world that has caused them so much grief, leaving behind the slimes that they once viewed as gods. I believe that once they ended up coming here, they no longer viewed the slimes as gods. They no longer viewed the slimes as gods because because there aren't nearly as many stone statues about the slimes. So I believe that this was the last one to be built. And I believe that it was more so as a means of, like, remembrance. Like, they appreciate everything that the slimes had done, for them. And it was kind of a final thank you to the slimes. But I believe that they stopped viewing slimes as gods, because as you progress through the Glass Desert, when you start off here at the bottom, you see a ton of them, but as you get further up, you see less and less of those worship stones for slimes. And I believe that just means that this civilization was slowly but surely no longer worshiping them. Perhaps they felt betrayed. Perhaps they felt like the slimes had done this to them. Or perhaps they just stopped believing that they were gods in the first place. I don't really know. I'm not really sure what it could be. But all I really know is that they left. They all left this place. And then sometime later after they left, that's when the oceans outside of the Glass Desert, they began to recede. The oceans outside the Glass Desert began to lower. Things started to get back to normal. Things started to get back to normal throughout the rest of the world. Suddenly, the oceans had finally receded, and all of the giant behemoths died off. Not because they couldn't make it to deeper waters in time, no, but because the water was gone entirely. Once the water receded, all that was left was the slime sea, which was essentially the bottom layer of the ocean. It receded so much that it got down to the slime sea. With no water left, the giant underwater behemoths had nowhere to go, and they just died off. Sometime after that, Earth humans discovered the far, far range. We discovered the planet. We discovered the planet. We discovered the planet, and we discovered slimes and plorts. And this, none of this was grass. When the water receded, none of this grass was here. These plants, these grass, none of it was here. And then, sometime after humans started preoccupying the place, all this started to grow. As was stated in Hobson's letter about the place. So, there you have it. I believe that that is the lore of Slime Rancher. Now, one question does remain. Why did the ancient civilization worship the slimes? Why did they think that the slimes were gods? Well, I actually have a bit of a theory on that too. I think that the slimes once they've eaten enough, I believe that some slimes, when they eat enough, they will they will grow so big to the point that they launch themselves off the planet and become planets. I believe that that is what I believe that that is why the moon has a slime face. It literally is a slime that grew so large. It is a slime that grew so large that it is now a moon for the far, far range. That's why in the ending credits, we see all the different slimes as like planets, because that's what they're supposed to be. That these guys are basically planets in the making. They haven't gotten big enough to launch themselves off the planet and become planets themselves. They haven't gotten big enough yet, but they will. They will get big enough. Eventually. So there you have it. My explanation as to what the lore of Slime Rancher is. Is there anything I missed? Do you guys have a better theory as to what all of this means? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment box below. But we're going to leave this one here. Next time, I will talk about what I want to see in the future, and probably do a little bit more farming and pick a slime to put here on the stage. So we will be doing that next time. But for now, thank you everybody so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did enjoy, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all that good jazz. If you have any suggestions of games for me to play, please let me know in the comment box below. And I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everybody!